Well, at the bottom line, my wife and I have suffered a frontline casualty in the drug wars. We lost our youngest son at age 21 to suicide after a year's drug use that we didn't know anything about. And I wish we didn't know what we now know, and no one would sign up to learn what we have learned. But among the things we've learned is the fact that there are predators and there are victims in the drug war, and it's critically important that the system acknowledge the differences between predators and victims and treat predators and victims differently. For the last 6 years, Karen and I have been speaking at drug court graduations and high schools and colleges and churches and civic organizations, trying to help people understand that the victims in the drug war need to be redeemed and restored and rehabilitated so they can be contributing members of society again, and the predators need to be nailed to the wall. But we can't use the same tools as to both, and we can't use the same techniques as to both. Well, in my mind, the Attorney General is not only the state's chief law enforcement official, which he or she is, but also the state's top lawyer. And if we're going to be hiring the state's top lawyer to the office of Attorney General, then that person ought to be a practicing lawyer, in my view. I've had the privilege for the last 34 years to be engaged in the practice of law, including significant courtroom advocacy. In the last 24 months, I've had the privilege of arguing before the Mississippi Supreme Court, before the Mississippi Court of Appeals, before the United States District Court at the federal level. And I think those are distinguishing factors as opposed to other candidates in the race. I've also had the privilege of serving as Chief of Staff and Counsel to Governor Kirk Fordyce. I was Litigation Counsel to Governor Haley Barbour. I was Auditor's Counsel to State Auditor Phil Bryant back when the governor was still in the auditor's office. And then more recently, Governor Bryant named me as co-chairman of his task force to overview the contract review process, the contract procurement process in the wake of the Department of Corrections bribery scandal a couple of years ago. So all of that is to say, I've served as counsel to the state's most important policy makers and highest officials, and that's one of the key roles of the Attorney General. I am, in fact, a big tip of the hat to the legislature. I think the steps in criminal justice reform that we've seen in the last couple of years are positive steps, and this most recent session, I think, was a particularly significant step forward in criminal justice reform. As you know, we've expanded our drug courts. Now we're going to call them intervention courts so that it's not just substance abuse that they're grappling with. The only issue that I would say now is that remains lacking is it's time to step up and fund the intervention courts statewide. Now, I appreciate we have limited resources. We do in every respect at all levels of government, and we have to make decisions about where we spend them. But in my estimation, the drug courts, now intervention courts, not only pay for themselves, but they actually pay money back to the state because they will free up money that otherwise would be required in the correction system, in the criminal justice system, in law enforcement agencies, because folks that need to be redeemed instead of being jailed will be returned back into as contributing members of society, and it's happening over and over again in those counties that can't afford drug courts. Well, one of the roles of the Office of the Attorney General is to provide training for the state's prosecutors at every level, municipal, county, and district level. And in my judgment, that's in addition to the needed training on here's the law, here's criminal procedure, here's how to keep your conviction rate high. It's things like professional judgment and prosecutorial discretion and knowing when it really is in the best interest of the community not to put a person in jail, not to seek some particular sentence, and instead to find a mechanism to get that person treated and then back about his or her life. Karen and I have had the privilege of speaking at about half a dozen drug court graduations in the last 6 years. And to a person, the men and women who testify on behalf of their classmates in the graduation, to a person, Sarah will say, this saved my life. Judge Smith saved my life. Judge Jones saved my life. And what they mean is being required to be accountable and responsible, being treated for the challenges that they had created in their own lives, running the risk of testing hot on a random drug test, and if so, getting put back in jail for 48 hours. Those kinds of things are motivating factors, and people's lives are in fact being saved. But another thing that I would say in terms of sort of the overall scope of where I believe the Attorney General's office ought to be going is I really believe that we need officials at every level, but certainly at state government, as statewide elected officials, who are as passionate about Mississippi's future as some people seem to be about our past, so that in the process of encouraging you and your peers to stay in the state of Mississippi and other younger adults to come into the state of Mississippi and stay to work and to make their lives, they have the conviction that there are state officials who care as much about their future as a lot of people want to foment about the past. Well, married for 36 years, and we reared 3 boys. Have a brand new grandbaby girl, and her only character flaw is she lives in Houston, Texas. Our middle son is about to be married in Washington, D.C. to a woman that he met from rural Pennsylvania. So the Lord is good, and it's a great country. We miss them, of course, and we hope to figure out a way to recruit them back home, but we want them to be blessed and happy, and that makes us feel happy. I wasn't looking for another job. I was at the stage in my life where my wife didn't say, "Why are you doing this?" She said, "Why do you want to do this?" Our lives are comfortable. We go home at the end of the day and we fix supper and we sit on the front deck or the back porch or in front of the fire if it's cold. And I just can't shake the conviction that I need to fight this crusade, and that it is a crusade that is both worth fighting and that must be won. And at the end of the day, I think what I would say is I think I bring the life's experiences, the career training, and the professional wherewithal to be the Attorney General that the people of Mississippi need.